Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast, episode number 162. T.R. Walters, a school teaching deer hunting machine from southern Michigan. Please support our sponsors as they make this show possible. Today's sponsor, Morris's Sporting Goods. Big Buck Registry is a virtual museum of hunting stories. We preserve a piece of Americana by interviewing and recording hunters about their hunts and experiences from across the country. And who knows, maybe we'll learn a thing or two along the way that'll help us take our hunt to the next level.
Hey everyone, this is Nikki Boxler from Winchester Life. Get ready to press play on my favorite podcast, Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm Chrissy Titus. I'm co-host of RNES Team Elf television show and NRA I Am Forever. Gear up for another amazing episode with Jay and Dusty on the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast.
Hey, this is Julie McLean with Brotherhood Outdoors, and you are listening to my favorite podcast on iTunes, the Big Buck Registry Deer Hunting Podcast.
Welcome to another episode of the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. My name is Jay, and you know what? As I say each and every time, thank you for pushing play on your audio device and giving me your ear for an hour. There's nothing that gives me more pleasure than to know that somebody is listening to us talk about deer hunting. And gosh darn it, if you were sitting here, right now with me, I'd be talking deer hunting back and forth with you, because that's what we like to do on this show. And so does my good friend and co-host, Dusty Phillips from Ohio. What's happening, Dusty?
Just enjoying life, Jay. That's all, and thanks to everybody that's joining us right here on the Big Buck Registry Deer Hunting Podcast. What another great week to be living free and enjoying the things the outdoors offers.
The weather finally broke. I have to say that. It's last week I was sitting in the studio and just a stream of sweat pooling down off my brow as we were just talking about deer hunting. But, I shut off the fans in the studio. I really got to figure that out. Sometimes I dread going into the studio in the summertime because it gets so hot in there, and I don't like the fans going or the AC, and I don't really have a way to keep it cold. But I don't know. We'll figure. I don't care. It's not my favorite place to be, but it's my favorite thing to do. So let's put it that way.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm fortunate enough I'm in a basement where I built my studio, and it stays pretty cool here, Jay. It's not too bad at all. The wintertime, I'm actually, sweatshirt weather, and
right
with I got a electric wood-burning fireplace behind me I flip on, so
that's nice.
It works out pretty good.
That's nice. Yeah, and I've been to your studio at your house. It's beautiful. I might have to pursue that in my basement so I can keep it a little more normal all year round.
Yeah, it just makes it nice to have an actual studio to go and sit down in and record the podcast. And it allows me to stay a little more focused on what I've got in front of me, and, the background noise not there. And it works out real well to be in the studio here. Just enjoying being on the mic with you and recording a great podcast that we all can learn and listen to, and just, take advantage of all the opportunity of the knowledge that comes forth here on the Big Buck Registry.
We do tap into a lot of knowledge, that's for sure. We find those great deer hunters that have a lot to say and know an awful lot about it, and we try to extract it from their brain so that we can use it in our own woods and in our own setups and try to make ourselves better deer hunters. And I got to say, with this today's show is nothing short of that. And in our next show with Nikki Boxler coming up next week, nothing short there. Some amazing stuff going on with Nikki. This week we're going to talk to T.R. Walters, and nobody knows who T.R. Walters is until today. On today's show, you'll know everything you need to know about T.R. Walters. And T.R. is from southern Michigan. He is a friend of our news guy, Jim Keller. And Jim was telling me about this buddy of his that he really admires. Told me how much of a deer hunter the guy was, and that he really knew his stuff. Knew a lot about food plots, had a lot of tree stands set up, had killed some big deer, was a selective deer hunter, and hunted a lot. So they, had all the formulas, all the things that we like to hear when we're trying to decide who to interview on the show. So we gave it a shot, and it was quite interesting. He he lived up to everything we thought he was. He's a very knowledgeable guy. He's a school teacher. So, school teachers are good at teaching things, and he's going to teach us some stuff about what he knows about deer hunting. And he's kind of a humble guy. I don't think he really thinks to teach others about what he knows about deer hunting. He's just trying to do it for himself, and was happy to come on to the show and tell us about how he does it. Because I think he just thinks he's just doing it, but he's actually pretty knowledgeable.
Right, just your average blue-collar, hardworking American that enjoys hunting and being in the outdoors.
Yeah, and now and then we identify some of those hardworking blue-collar guys, the non-celebrities, and this is one of the segments of the show I love, is when we can find somebody out there that really knows their stuff, that hasn't hit the celebrity circuit. And we just highlight them and learn things from them too. I think every hunter can learn something else from another hunter, no matter who you are. And this is one of those cases. Before we get to that, and before we get to the deer news, I do want to say that I don't know if you've checked out the Outdoor Podcast channel lately, but you should. You can find them on iTunes, or find us on iTunes, because we're part of that. But we just added a new show this week, and it's Back at the Lodge with Jim and Michelle. And Michelle Schuerman is our good friend, and she's got her own podcast. And she just jumped on board with OPC. So go over to the Outdoor Podcast channel and check that out. Let's turn to Jim Keller with the deer news.
For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the deer news. Our first story this week, National Deer Alliance launches new website. This story was originally featured on ammoland.com and was posted by Duncan Johnson. The National Deer Alliance, the NDA, has recently developed the organization's first comprehensive website to keep deer hunters informed about deer issues across the country, while also providing important updates on NDA's work. The new site makes it easier than ever to sign up for a free membership. The website is also home to the NDA Action Center, which allows deer and hunting advocates to easily contact legislators about matters important to ensuring the future of North America's most popular big game animal. The site will also feature a president's blog penned by NDA President and CEO Nick Pinizzotto, and an editorial section that will highlight the latest news in the deer world. For anyone unfamiliar with the National Deer Alliance, the NDA is a 501c4 nonprofit organization with a mission to serve as the guardian for the wild deer conservation and our hunting heritage. The NDA focuses primarily on issues at the policy level. NDA is a leader in advocating for sustainable, science-based conservation of wild deer and fair chase hunting, and is a source for credible, responsible, and timely information. Founding members of the NDA include the Archery Trade Association, Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, the Mule Deer Foundation, National Shooting Sports Foundation, Quality Deer Management Association, Vista Outdoor, and Whitetails Unlimited. For additional information about the NDA, please check www.nationaldeeralliance.com. Maine panel to decide soon on big bump and deer hunt permits. This story was originally featured on the WCSH NBC Channel 6 News website. Maine wildlife regulators will soon decide if they want to increase the number of deer hunting permits by 60% following a mild winter. The state's Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife has said more than 45,000 any deer permits are proposed for the coming fall hunting season. A state advisory board council is going to vote on whether to approve the proposal on Wednesday. State biologists have said the moderate winter allowed for the increase in hunting permits. Harsh winters in previous years have had the reverse effect, culling the deer herd and requiring less hunting. Hunters who don't have one of the quote-unquote any deer permits are only allowed to shoot deer that have antlers. The permit should be available in 18 of Maine's 29 wildlife management districts. Deer vasectomy plan for Staten Island gets state okay. This story was originally featured on the SILive.com website and was reported by Anna Sanders. Last week, the state of New York approved Mayor Bill de Blasio's $2 million plan to perform vasectomies on male deer to control Staten Island's herd. On August 12th, the State Department of Environmental Conservation issued the city's contractor a license for surgical sterilization, tagging, and radio collaring of Staten Island deer. The DEC regulates wildlife and had to okay the city's plan. The agency doesn't recommend fertility control programs to manage deer populations because of their limited effectiveness and inability to quickly reduce deer-human conflicts. A spokeswoman for the DEC did not answer questions about the approved license. Fertility control is only permitted by the state as part of a scientific study, which is what the city proposed. The Parks Department planned to sterilize hundreds of male deer over the next 3 years. Anthony DiNicola of White Buffalo is expected to start performing the vasectomies in September in time for this fall's rutting season. White buffalo can bait deer with whole kernel corn or apples, The deer can be captured with drop nets, clover traps, and tranquilizer darts. Bucks would be driven unconscious to one of several park facilities that would be prepared for the 15-minute surgery. Long-acting post-op pain medication must be given to them during the procedure. Only 527 deer were found on Staten Island during the city's latest aerial study of the herd. That's 236 less than the last count 2 years ago, and well below what officials expected. The city said there's nothing to indicate the population has declined. Fewer deer may have been counted this year because the survey was conducted in warmer, less cloudy weather. An unrestrained and expanding herd can harm parks and private property, spread tick-borne illness, and wander into roads, more often increasing the risk for deadly vehicle collisions. Sterilization was chosen because the city believes Staten Island's herd is mostly growing through reproduction, not migration. Sterilizing males instead of females would be faster, cheaper, and more humane. Still, some wildlife experts have argued that the plan won't work because the city is ignoring basic deer biology and conventional herd management practices. We will stay tuned to the results of this effort. For additional information about the Staten Island plans, please check out www.silive.com. Most decorated female Olympic shooter speaks out for gun rights. This story was originally featured on the OutdoorHub.com website. In her own words, 5-time Olympic medal winner Kim Rhodes said the shooting trap and skeet is natural as walking. That is the sort of comment that one expects from the most decorated U.S. female shooter in the history of the Olympic Games, but in a recent interview with NPR, Rhodes made some comments that some may consider controversial. Specifically, she was outspoken about her views regarding gun rights and proposed gun control legislation. Quote, "We have a lot of bills and legislation that are making it very difficult for people to go out and enjoy the sport that I personally love," end quote. Rhodes, who started sports shooting at a young age, worries that children today will no longer have the opportunities she did. She is also keenly aware that a stigma is increasingly attached to the sport she loves, and that translates to the Olympics as well. Rhodes said that while other athletes were asked about their training regimes, she was being asked about the mass shooting in Orlando. "No other sports in the Olympic gets that," she told NPR. "They don't ask the swimmers to comment after somebody drowns." It is something that Rhodes has grappled with for her entire career, which spanned 27 years of competition, 5 Olympic Games, and 3 gold medals. The long and ongoing debate over gun control oftentimes spills over to shooting sports as well, but Rhodes said that she hopes to change perceptions, especially going into this year's Rio 2016 Olympics after a strong finish in London 4 years ago. Rhodes says that she hopes that she can generate some positive news and encourage others to join the sport. That is the legacy that she wants to leave behind. The champion shooter remarked that more young athletes do seem to be interested in taking up shooting sports, and the field is becoming increasingly diverse as people of all backgrounds and nationalities join in. More competition for her, but she's not worried. Rhodes will be coming into the 2016 Olympics as one of the athletes with the most medals, and certainly as one of the favorites in her field. For additional details in this story, including the video segments of the interviews with Ms. Rhodes, please check out OutdoorHub.com. That concludes this week's edition of the Big Buck Registry's Deer News. If you have any ideas for future topics or have any questions about any of these topics, please email me at jim@bigbuckregistry.com. For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the Deer News.
Thanks to Jim Keller for the Deer News. Without further ado, here is T.R. Walters.
T.R. Walters, welcome to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Dude, we're psyched to have you. We've heard some good things. You know, we hear these little rumors that get spread around by our friends, and it always leads us to the world-class deer hunter. Of course, we're trying to dissect the habits of world-class deer hunters on this show, and we heard things about you. So we're psyched to have you on and want to see what makes you tick.
All right, thank you.
So tell us about yourself, TR. Where are you? Where are you from?
I'm from, Hickory Corners, Michigan, a little small town.
Okay.
Grew up on a dairy farm there as a kid, and then teach in the school district that I graduated from, Gull Lake. So, which gives me some time to put some work in the summer, and I like food plots and different things like that. So, it's also work at a golf course, which made it so I can meet Jim Keller and that.
Gotcha. Our news guy, Jim Keller. The news guy.
Yep.
So you're in lower Michigan, and so you got some farming background. What do you teach?
I teach 5th grade. and teach math and science in the 5th grade.
You're kind of connected to the science world a little bit, and that obviously carries well over into deer hunting. Because there's a whole science behind it, and understanding the beast is one of your biggest assets when it comes to deer hunting.
Yeah, deer hunting's it's one of those things that I think the more you get into it, the more addicting it gets.
How old were you when you first went in the field?
Actually, I think I started when I was 15, but in high school, I didn't have a ton of time to spend in the woods.
Sure.
With playing, 3 sports in high school, so I didn't really get into it until I got done playing college baseball.
What drew you to it? What was you probably had some exposure as a child, but what brought you back to it?
Actually, family. My grandpa Thurman absolutely loved deer hunting, and back then the deer hunting you essentially went to the UP to go deer hunting, or northern Michigan. And then my cousin Dawson, when I first got into teaching, and that kind of pushed me back into it. And then since then it's been hooked. The
UP is that some of your stomping grounds?
No, I never really spent a whole lot of time in the UP. We have a cabin in northern Michigan near Kalkaska.
Over the years, you must have had some pretty good encounters. I mean, Michigan's been known for its deer hunting over the years, and certainly a large deer population. Tell us about some of the landscape of the places you're hunting right now.
2 main places I hunt is like the Parents Farm, which is 80 acres, and for Berry County, it's about as flat as it can ever get. You think you're out in the plains. It's got 10 or 15 acre wood on one side, and then maybe a 20 acre wood and along the back line of the property.
Okay.
And then the other places, I live up in my grandma's old lake house, which has got like 69 acres, and that's more of like goat country. It's pretty hilly, kind of about 30 acres of CRP land, and then a mixture of hardwoods and pine trees, and then what I put into food plots.
Let's talk a little bit about food plots right now. When do you start planting your food plots?
I do both spring and fall. So up at the farm with as much ag on that 640 there, it's pretty much I'm like probably the only one that really hunts on that 640 acres there, that square mile. And with the ag there, it's kind of a waste of a time to put in a food plot. But at the lake, there's ag within like a half mile of the property line or a mile, but not a whole lot of it. So I put in spring food plots, and then I put in stuff like in August. Like I just got done planting some clover, like a biologic wintergreen, which is a wheat, clover, brassica, and oats combo.
What do you do in spring food plots in Michigan?
I don't know. I have probably about an acre and a half of corn that I planted, and then there's years that I put in some soybeans and like an alfalfa clover mix before. So like I've tried different things to see where I've had more success, and sometimes time can kind of be an issue with that. But I've been pretty fortunate, because growing up in a dairy farm, that we still have some of the ag equipment that we have, and that helps.
Do you hunt food plots primarily? I mean, is that your kind of your go-to method?
It's a combo. Sometimes it's like the food source. Some of the food plots I put in, I actually never put anything on. Like I leave it. Okay. And then there's some of the stuff that I'll primarily hunt. Like there's certain areas of like the lake that I try to leave alone and try not to get too involved, but I want to keep them in the center of the property.
Okay. And why do you leave them alone?
I think sometimes the more you go into an area, the more likely you get a chance of bumping something out. Okay. And sometimes less is better.
All right. So tell us about some of the things you've learned over the years. How many years total have you been hunting whitetail in Lower Michigan?
Oh, let's see, 25 years.
Okay.
And I'd say successfully probably the last 15 years, but that's where I think I've had the most successes in the last 15 years.
All right. So that brings up an interesting time frame. So the first 10 years and then the last 15. And it sounds like there was a line, like there was something that kind of clicked.
Time was the biggest issue.
Okay.
So when I was in high school playing, football, bow hunting, didn't really have a whole lot of time. And then it would be basketball season right around. I remember scheduling a college visit on November 15th because it was the first day of tryouts. And if you were having excused absence, you couldn't practice. So you hunt in the morning, go visit a school, and then go back for practice.
Right.
But once I started having more time, and to be honest with you, switching from an improvement in equipment, because I remember shooting pumpkin slugs with smooth bore, and you're using a bead sight, and when I first started hunting, tree stand hunting with guns in Michigan was illegal. So,
okay.
Yeah, so being able to get in a tree, get to hide yourself a little bit better, you see a little bit better, and then, going to a scoped gun and, rifled slugs or, sabots, and that was a huge difference. That and time.
Yeah, definitely.
Time is by far the best, but
gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. What draws you to hunting? I mean, where's your interest? I mean, what is it that makes you want to go in the woods in the first place?
As a teacher, it is like I go there, and I go home, and I might be 3.5 hours that I get to sit in a tree stand. But how could it be any better than that? I mean, it's peace and quiet. It's relaxing, and you never know what you're going to see. It's
right. That's true. What's the deer population like in Lower Michigan?
Pre-drought year, which was 2012, I think it was when we had that. I mean, it wasn't uncommon to be 40 deer per square mile in Berry County, if not more, depending on where you're at.
Wow.
And then that drought year, EHD kind of hit certain parts of Berry County pretty hard.
Yeah.
And the numbers dropped quite a bit. But there'd be nights, especially at the parents, where you can see a mile in a direction, you might see 50 deer in a night. Now it's like, you might see a dozen. So, I mean, the deer are still there and they're coming back. But the unfortunate thing is, I think it kind of, when those numbers drop like that, and I think it scared away, some of the people that used to spend a little bit more time in the woods.
You've got some food plots going. You've got a large deer population for the most part, other than the EHD that rolled in a little while ago. How is the deer population today? Is it on the rebound? And are you still seeing some situations left over?
It's definitely on the rebound. I know of, there's a guy that literally owns 80 acres, probably 2.5 miles south of where Jim and I both have land. And last year he thought it was great because he saw 6 deer during the deer season. But those first couple of years after that, he didn't see anything, even with he just had like a couple deer on trail cam. That was about it. Some of the places that, it almost wiped it out completely. Yeah. And it was just one of those things where it's a shame. It's like, I know that the herd needed to be thinned out some, but you hate to see it,
right,
a complete decimation like that.
Right. Are you concerned?
I think it's coming back. Our winters, we've had a couple of hard winters, but it's nothing like, northern Michigan or what you get in New Hampshire there. And we have enough ag land around to where you have lots of twins in the spring.
So you got something on the rebound. What are you looking for in an animal when you're out hunting? Are you looking for a freezer meat? Are you looking for trophy bucks or a blend of all? And what's your strategy there?
I used to go, early on is like, wow, if it was a buck, I was excited. We could have 2 buck tags, and it didn't matter what size they were. So the first 2 bucks I would see would be the ones, like I'd shoot. Then I realized, if you shoot a 2.5-year-old or a 3.5-year-old or something even older, how much more meat you get off of one of those deer versus, a 1.5-year-old, forkhorn. Right. Going, hey, that's twice as much meat.
Sure. Oh yeah, definitely.
So even in that process, it's nice. But I definitely am looking for the more mature deer. I'd love to get a Boone and Crockett deer. But at the same time, I just love being out in the woods and then experience, like last year, it was the first year that I've taken just 1 buck in the last 15 years. So, I was pretty particular and I was letting some of the ones that were just 2.5, walk by. I'm like, I may never shoot it, but the neighbor may get a chance at it.
Yeah.
But I just know that they got a chance of growing up, getting bigger.
How many days do you spend in the woods each season?
Bow season opens up October 1st.
Okay.
The late bow season ends January 1st, so you pretty much can hunt from October 1st to January 1st. So every day that I can and that the conditions are right, I'll spend in there.
Okay.
There's some years I don't get the muzzleloader season. I might be tagged out, but there's other years that I might be freezing, come January 1st.
Okay. So what type of style of hunting are you doing mostly? Is it tree stand? You on the ground blinds? What are we looking at?
I do a combination of tree stands and ground blinds. I love the invention of the pop-up tent. It gives you a chance to hunt some locations that if you don't have a good tree anywhere near there, it makes it pretty tough. In fact, one year, I literally constructed a tower out of round bales in the center. It was like a deer attraction. Like they had to come check it out.
Really?
I mean, I built it, and I'm like, oh, it was amazing watching the deer like go for fence rows and come to the center of the property. They might be visible, but if you're a quarter of a mile away from anything, they're pretty safe, especially down here where it's shotgun only.
It's interesting you bring that up. I want to go back to that topic a little bit because I want to ask you some questions about the things that you do specifically that you think you do different than others. But let's talk about your tree stand setup a little bit.
Okay.
Tell me about the numbers of tree stands you've got out. How do you pick a stand site? What are you doing at the stand site to make it more effective?
Most of the tree stand, I don't know. I probably have 15 tree stands on between the parents' farm and the lake. There's some of them that I really only can hunt with certain wind conditions, but I mean there's a few of them that I hunt like predominantly the wind comes out of the west, southwest. So like I try to have those near food sources. That you're going to have the best activity. That's the one thing that it's changed in the last 15 years is being selective. If the wind wasn't right, or I would stay away from it, go hunt another stand, even though that your trail cam may show that deer that you wanted to shoot standing in front of your tree stand that night, but knowing that if that deer was there, it was probably going to smell you. So, I mean, it's just one of those things where sometimes you kind of have to do that. I try to get it in some pinch points where for some reason that they'll try to travel in, for one reason or another, that they're forced to go one way or the other. Also, too, is just kind of observing, the deer and where they come from. So like from one year to the next, one tree stand might not be as effective. For some reason, the deer coming out of the woods 50 yards further down.
So how do you decide which of the 15 stands you have, which ones how do you decide which one you're going to hunt that morning or that evening? What types of things are going through your head when you're trying to pick the right one?
Wind is a big one, and then food sources. So early bow season, especially before acorns will drop, deer might be on some of the more green things, and you'll see a lot of them there. And then, it's in some of the oak trees that I have, like some of the tree stands near, like from one year to the next, they may have more acorns or another. So then I might try to get near one of those, but sometimes you just kind of have to wait it out and just hope that they start returning back to the green stuff or catching them, transitioning from one place to another.
Okay. So there's no set strategy. You're just constantly observing?
Yeah, it's through observation.
Okay.
If I'm seeing them in one spot over and over again, I'm going to try to get to where I can hunt that without trying to bump them out.
Okay.
And there's sometimes there's nothing you can do. You just might have to get into a spot that you're hoping to catch them transitioning from one spot to another.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about trail cameras a little bit. How much do you or how much of an emphasis do you put on trail camera observation?
What I love about the trail cam is that you see what's out there, because there's a lot of times that there are deer there that you might never see with the naked eye, but they're there all the time. I like noticing when they're moving, because sometimes you get that beginning of November and all of a sudden you're getting those great bucks in the middle of the day, 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock in the morning. It's one of those things that helps you, because sometimes it can, if you don't see anything, it could be a long sit from, first light to 11 o'clock in the morning, but it helps you stay through there if you can know that they're still coming out there. Then I also like to see where their hot spots are.
So you do use that. You use just general observation and the game camera. It's a complete set of observation tools, basically, I think is what it comes down to.
Oh, yeah.
And let's talk a little bit about the ground blind. You said you're using ground blinds. How do you decide where to put a ground blind in the areas you're hunting?
Sometimes it's actually where I've got one set up now. I actually set it up. I know bow season doesn't come until October 1st, but I like to have the deer kind of used to it being there and kind of brushed in. Mm-hmm. There's a couple spots just don't have good trees to put tree stands in.
Okay.
Nice thing about the ground blind is it kind of keeps you out of the weather a little bit. Or, in some aspects, I think it helps kind of contain your scent. It's a pretty cool feeling when you have, a deer walk by a ground blind and you're like literally 5 yards away from it. I mean,
right.
You're eye to eye with it.
Right. Gotcha. So it's interesting what you just said. So you you've got ground blinds out that I don't know if you just put them out, but your bow season doesn't start for how long now?
A month and a half.
Month and a half. So you're putting out your ground blinds now. Is that a standard routine for you? And why do you do it?
Honestly, just so the deer can kind of get used to it. I have paid the price with that before, where I put them out a little early and had some stuff stolen, but that was quite a long time ago.
Okay.
If the deer are seeing it all the time, they're not gonna, not to be, I don't think they should be spooked by it. I mean, it's just part of the natural landscape, and there really isn't going to be, a whole lot of scent involved with it, or they'll just walk by it like it's nothing there.
Very smart. Very, very smart. All right, so let's talk a little bit about your gear setup. I'm going to turn the mic over to Dusty here and just go through like what you would typically bring into the woods with you. What are you using for cover scents and things you have in your bag, that kind of thing?
Do you carry a backpack?
For the most part, no, I do not. I mean, I usually have what I need, like in a plastic tub in the back of my truck.
Gotcha. So it's kind of self-contained.
Yeah.
Take out what you need and go on. What do you take into the woods with you?
A grunt tube. Been there many a times where you don't have the grunt tube and you're kicking yourself. A doe bleat. Let's see. There might be things like I might take out, like doe estrus. Like come late October, early November. It's bad luck to carry my hunting knife, so I got to leave that in the truck because I think it's kind of bad luck. It's
superstitious, huh?
Oh yeah, a little superstitious. But
what kind of camouflage are you using?
Like I use the Realtree AP. Like I use it with a scent lock. I've got a suit that I bought and very comfortable, nice, and especially you get those days that you're, it might be 65, 70 degrees when you first go out, and it might dip down to about 50. You stay comfortable. Layers, dress in layers, depending if it's colder or not. Then my heavier camo, it's scent lock as well. But I made the comment a few years ago that the coat size was a 2X, and so I made the comment to a buddy of mine that I should grow into it. Unfortunately, I kind of think I did. But so, I mean, I'm always very conscious making sure that I spray the stuff down. Like early season, I'll often use like a fresh earth, like wafer, and I might have it with my camo. Just something to not let them know that I smell. I mean, it's funny, from October to January, it's scent-free shampoo, scent-free deodorant, the whole works. Got to have something for the coyotes afterwards, Just one of those things. It's just, just as scent-free as I could be.
Right on. Yeah, for sure. What kind of boots are you wearing when you're hunting?
My brother Brian bought me some Danners a few years ago, so I've been using Danner boots. Absolutely love them. Early season, uninsulated, everything from a 600-gram boot to a 1,200-gram boot, and go from there, depending on how cold it is or not cold. I fell in love with them. It was almost like wearing tennis shoes that keep your feet dry and warm.
Yeah, right on, for sure. So those are Danner boots in.
Yeah.
Let's get in a little bit about your bow setup. What kind of bow are you shooting?
I've been shooting a Matthews switchback for the last 11 years. I had to propose to my wife before I could actually pick up the bow, so I remember the day. Thinking about switching my optics, because the one thing I found with hunting out of the ground blind is, you have your legal shooting hours, but when you're in a ground blind, because it's so dark in there, it might be 15, 20 minutes beforehand. Unless you have lighted fiber optic pens, you can't see your pens, and you still have 15 or 20 minutes of legal shooting light left. That's pretty depressing when you see something come out and realize that you can make a clean and ethical shot, and you can't see your pen, so you're not taking a shot.
Right, for sure, I understand that. What kind of arrows are you shooting?
I've used the Maxima Hunter for the last 11 years. I like the fact that they have a little bit more weight to them. I know my arrow speed's down, a little bit slower, but I think it might help with the penetration.
Right. Any particular broadhead you prefer over others?
Yes. I've started using the Rages about 6 years ago, and I like the blood tracking when it comes to that. When you can track a deer at a fast-paced walk, that's a great thing. Like at my parents' farm, there's been a lot of times that I literally see the deer tip over, just because you can see in a lot of different directions. But at the lake, the brush and the tall grass, I mean, it's pretty difficult to, track sometimes. A deer might only have gone 70 yards, after you shoot it. You don't see the deer, within 5 yards after you shoot it. And just having that mammoth blood trail is a wonderful thing.
Let's get a little bit about your tree stand setup. Do you prefer hang-ons, ladders? What do you prefer tree stand-wise?
Being about 6'2", 240, I like the ladder stands. I've hunted from a few hang-on ones, but I definitely prefer the ladder stands. And I like the ladder stands that have the full, full spot for your feet. I mean, the full floor. When you're in a tree, you might have to shoot behind you or do different things. If you've got that little stop, that's not an option. So, and I don't really want to try out one of those hunter safety things. So to make sure it works.
Right. Yeah, I understand that. I'm no little fella myself, and me and a hang-on just don't see eye to eye.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's some of them that are great. I mean, if I hunted more public land, I would definitely be someone that would be looking into doing that, or, the climbers. But because I hunt predominantly, private land, that's the ladder stand. I mean, it's great. I think it's a little bit safer to put up, especially if you have, bring somebody with you to help do it. That's always the scariest thing in the world is when you're strapping up the, a ladder stand, especially you got some of those ones are 22 feet, you're strapping it in. You're just like going, oh, this could go, bad but that's where the buddy system might be, or having an extra ladder there to help out.
Right. Yeah, for sure. It definitely doesn't hurt to have a hunting buddy that can come to the woods with you. That's a fact there.
Oh yeah.
Before we get into the hunt with Jay, tell us what you do. Let's say we pulled up to the woods, and do you got any spray or anything that you use before you go in?
Yeah, usually I use the Scent-Away to spray everything down before I go in.
Is that scented or just the normal unscented?
Unscented. I try to do that as thoroughly as I can. There's been times that the deer had to smell you for some reason or another. For some reason, either thermals or putting that stuff on, like your scent isn't strong enough to really spook them. So I'm a pretty firm believer in it. Who knows what you don't see because of your scent?
Yeah, for sure. No doubt about it. Jay, you want to get into a deer hunt?
I'd like to get into a deer hunt, but before we do that, I had one other question for you. Do you use any of the moon phase strategies when trying to decide what day to hunt over others? Or is that one of those things you're just like, that's just a myth and it doesn't matter?
I do at times when it comes to maybe scheduling maybe a personal day to try to hunt, which might be the best. Like I'll use like the Field and Stream, where they'll have like their best days to hunt. I do have an app on my phone where it'd show like predominant times and when the deer are supposed to be moving. Field and Stream actually used to have like a link on their website and like on the deer feeding, and it was actually pretty scary on like you could actually punch in your zip code and the whole works.
Right.
And especially early season, for some reason it like it's not dark until almost 8 and 5 o'clock because of the hour, and it'll show it, and they have like a 3-day window, and it factor in the weather and the whole works. I do look at it, and there's definitely got to be something that goes into it. I mean, otherwise the rut wouldn't start within a certain time every year.
Right. No, you're right. What about the barometer? Do you look at cold fronts coming through, or do you look at changes in pressure?
To be honest with the barometric pressure, I don't really look at. Now, I do look at like if a cold front's coming in, or if a storm's like a winter storm's going to be coming in. It's amazing. Like a winter storm starts rolling in, they'll hit the food sources hard. Unfortunately, sometimes some of those winter storms start in the middle of the night, so you don't have an opportunity to hunt. But like if you have one that's going to be rolling in, just after dark, I mean, just the amount of deer activity you'll see.
Gotcha. Okay. All right, let's go on a hunt. I think you've got a pretty good hunt that you're going to tell us the story about, and I don't know where we're going or what state we're in. I assume we're on the family farm or something of that nature.
Yep.
But sounds like it starts with a interesting beginning and ends with a successful end. And I want to hear about everything in between.
Last year, didn't get some of the trail cams out until a little bit later. I mean, had food plots in, and food plots were looking great. So, Jim's like going, "Hey, have you put?" I'm like, "Yeah." Then I go, "I have to get a couple new ones." Like for some reason, trail cams don't last forever. But so I finally get the trail cam out, and first day that I have it out there, I'm like, "Oh, I'll go check see if anything's came in," and I'm like, "Wow, there's this deer's got to be a nice 140 inch or better 9-point," and there was with another 8-point that was probably about 140 inches as well. I'm like, that's pretty good. Literally second day of October that you're getting two bucks like that at the same time, literally 15 yards in front of one of my favorite tree stands. So it's just one of those things. I'm like, wow, this is pretty exciting. And then realized how many pictures I was getting of this deer. I mean, on this 68-acre farm, I would get pictures of this deer all over, like maybe a 10-acre core area. And I mean, a lot of pictures. This deer just kept showing up, and daytime, nighttime, and the whole works. And you kind of gets the juices flowing, and I'm pretty excited about, especially when you have two of them. And I'm literally hunting I hadn't seen this deer for literally until November 1st. I did not see him with my naked eyes, and until then. I did see the 8-point that was about 140 inches twice, and the first time I saw him, he was a ways away, and I'm like, all right, wind's perfect. I grunted, and the deer have that, I really don't want to get my butt kicked. They kind of tuck the tail and just kind of ease off. I'm like, that's interesting. How often do you see a 140-inch deer literally tuck their tail and walk away from a deer grunting?
Right.
And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, that's just odd. And then I see him again, and he was literally 100 and so yards off, and he, was, getting late, and just too late be even for him to, come in, and he eased off. And then November 1st is one of those days. I don't know what it is. It's, like our opening day of gun season is November 15th. But for some reason, November 1st is just, I get pretty excited about November 1st. And I wake up, perfect frosty morning, and I'm sitting there, and I hear, a buck grunting, and I hear, a little bit of chasing. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then I literally see that 140-inch, 8-point. And I'm like, oh, and he's coming in like on a beeline, but I mean, he gets within 50 yards of me, 40 yards, and even a little bit closer. But I mean, it was so thick, there's no prayer of getting a shot, which this is the cool thing about bow season. Been gun season, he would have been dumped. I mean, when I first saw him,
right.
And it's just one of those things that you just get to see this stuff. And he starts to ease off and like grunt, and he literally does the same thing that he did before, where he tucks the tail and walks off. I'm like, what is up with this? This deer is literally a scaredy cat. And so then I see a doe walking, got her tail at half mast. Love that sight, just because when I see a doe walking like that, that there's going to be a buck following. And then I catch a glimpse of something huge following. I'm like, oh, he's following her. And then it's the 100, ends up being 150-inch 9-point, right on her tail. And of course, he's 70 yards away. I'm like going, why couldn't this be opening day of gun season?
Right.
My taxidermy bill would be great. And so he's following this doe, and he's there. And of course, another buck, some of the deer I had, were between that 110 to 120 range. And he was following. I'm like, okay, maybe I can get this deer. I grunt, did a little snort wheeze, and this buck the big one starts coming right towards me. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. That other buck goes in there to try to get some way. He's away, and that 9-point literally goes and beats the snot out of it. I mean, I literally felt bad for it. And then it goes back with the doe. I'm like, okay, let me try it again. Snort wheeze, the buck comes in, and that buck didn't learn its lesson and goes back in there, and it gets the snot beat out of it. I'm like, oh my goodness. So, and then he beds down with his doe, like, I don't know, 80 yards from me. And all I could see is his rack sitting there in the tall grass.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's 8 o'clock in the morning. I mean, like, oh, this is, I've been out here an hour, and I've seen all this stuff, and this buck just beds there. So I literally text my wife, and I'm like, it's going to be a while before I'm in.
Yeah.
She wanted to go do something. I'm like, nah, I'm not going to be here for a while. So
on the snort wheeze, are you doing that with your mouth, or are you using a device?
The snort wheeze I did with the mouth.
Okay.
The mad buck growl. Like the newer ones have the snort wheeze, but I've had success in the past with a snort wheeze. Okay. When it works like a charm.
Just using your teeth and lips and blowing it out. Like, okay.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Just go from what you hear in the wild. Like, to be honest with you, I thought it was one of those fake things you heard until I actually heard it in the wild, and you're like, hey, they really do that.
Right.
But so I'm watching it, and this buck literally gets up with the doe periodically, and I'm like, this is insane. And I literally, on the other side, there's like the best way to describe it, it's thick brush. There's like a little tree line, tall like switchgrass, and I mean, it's 5 foot tall type thing. Then there's wall of pine trees, and in there I have a tree stand that's probably 100 yards from it, but it's on the right direction for the wind. I'm like, man, I wished I could be in that tree stand there. So after watching this thing for, being bedded down for 2.5 hours, I decide, no, this is stupid. I'm going to get down and literally go all the way around the property and sneak into that tree stand. Probably one of the worst ideas I've had, but it seemed like a brilliant idea. So I get to the tree stand and I get in there, everything's fine. And I'm like, all right, sitting there and, looking around. I don't see it, but I mean, like I said, that switchgrass is, 5 foot tall. So I grunted once and the buck stood up and he's like 45 yards from me. I mean, I just about swallowed the grunt, but I'm like, oh my goodness, he's right there. So I'm pretty pumped. I, got an arrow knocked and the whole works, and I'm ranging everything, making sure that, I know the yardages to the trees by the back, like the back of my hand, but you never want to second guess yourself. Is it 30 yards or 40 yards and, mess up. And finally the doe gets up and this buck's working its way around. And there was a couple times that he got within good shooting distance, but, quartering to or brushing. And I'm like going, just can't take that sort of shot. And meanwhile, I'm clicking on and off my release. I'm like, this is insane. And keep ranging. So the doe starts coming by me, and then he comes, and I go to draw back, like my arrow came off my string. Never had that happen, and I must have either pushed the arrow forward in all the times where I clicked on and off my release doing that. I'm like, are you kidding me? And he's 20 yards broadside, facing away. So I try to let my bow down slowly, and I believe my arrow hit the trigger, and my bow dry fires. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And the buck stops, turns, and looks my direction, and doesn't even care that I'm there. And he starts looking at the doe. I go to put the arrow on my bow, and I'm like, where'd my knot go? I look at it, and it's down towards the bottom cam. I'm like, I realized when it did that, the string came off the cam. And I'm sitting there, and this deer literally now is like 15 yards away, broadside, standing there with his doe, licking his lip, doesn't care. I got a bow that is not working. I thinking I just scrapped my bow. Matthews aren't cheap. And I'm like, oh, just sick to my stomach. I literally, if I thought I could have killed the deer with my bow, I think I would have thrown my bow at it. But
right.
I'm sitting there. I go, no one's going to believe this. So then I grab out my iPhone, and this is a minute and a half after this. I finally get the wits to do this. I take out the phone and I video him. I have like a nice 3.5 minute video of him just standing there. He doesn't have a care of the world, and he just walks out with this doe. I mean, by this point in time, he's only 50 yards away, and I'm just so sick to my stomach. I mean, I could have thrown up all over myself. So wind's right. I'm so depressed. I mean, I thought about throwing myself out of the tree, but I probably would have just hurt myself. And so I literally do something that I ease out because he's bedding there with the doe, and I come back in leave the same way. I get across the field. I mean, 150 yards away, 200 yards away. I get out the binos, and he's just standing there as proud as could be, 50 yards away from that tree stand with that doe. I'm like, I just couldn't believe it. So I went to Bob's Gun and Tackle, which is a place up here in Hastings, and showed the guy that in the bow shop there and with this. And believe it or not, I'm a pretty strong guy. I tried to put that string back on by myself in the tree stand.
Right.
I mean, I was trying really hard. I mean, but that wasn't happening. Believe it or not, I wasn't strong enough to be as strong as a bow press. So the guy's like, oh, he goes, that's pretty depressing. And like I said, I thought I scrapped my bow. And come to find out, the fix of my bow was only $5. I mean, I don't know if it was just $5 or he felt sorry for me, $5, but he did enjoy the video. He goes, oh, that's pretty impressive. So I'm thinking, this is the worst thing in the world. I mean, granted, I was still getting lots of pictures of this deer. How often do you get a second chance at a deer like that? So that's where I use one of the best days of the rut to take off a day to hunt, and no luck at seeing them. I had trail cam pictures of them here and there. Opening day of gun season, rolled through. I was getting trail cam pictures of them. That time of year, I can't hunt every day. And didn't see them. And then my brother Reggie came up, who that morning at the parents' farm shot his best deer that he's ever shot in his life there. And he came up there, and he knew what was up there. And I was kind of getting a little nervous because, it was dark before 6. And at 6:30, he hadn't came in from his tree stand yet. And I'm like, where did he fall out of the tree? I'm kind of, I'm like, all right, I'll come back and check. And my brother's, a teacher at the high school, and honest, he's more of the straight-laced one of the family.
Yeah.
And he comes in there, and he goes, "You have a monster running around here." I go, and my brother Reggie doesn't drop the F-bomb. It's like,
right.
And it was just, I was like, I told you. He goes, there was an 8-point that was standing in front of me. And he goes, any other year, he goes, I would have punched my second tag. And he goes, it was as nice as the 8-point I shot this morning. And he goes, and this deer was just on pins and needles. And it goes walking into the pines. And all of a sudden, he sees the 9-point. It comes across. And it just melees it. And he goes, it's 25 yards away, but it's in pines, and it's got, the pine branch.
Yeah.
And he goes, it is just beating the snot out of this deer. And he goes, I've never heard of anything so loud in my life. And he goes, I'm trying to figure out how to shoot it and like this. And we joked around about it. I go, honestly, you probably could have got right out of the tree stand and walked right down to it, and they wouldn't have paid attention to you.
Right,
but
right.
He goes, that was the coolest hunt I've ever been on in my life. He goes, I've never seen anything like that. And I go, that's the sort of stuff you see during bow season. I go, but that's awesome. So, he was shaking telling about this. I'm like, this is great that, he's got the bug about it. So we're doing this, and I hadn't seen the deer. I hadn't got any trail cam pictures of him for about a week. And I'm like, I was kind of going, well, maybe somebody got him. And then he was showing back up and, getting some more pictures. And of course, obviously, some daylight pictures, on days where I'm, teaching the youth of America and the whole works. And I'm like,
sure.
Yeah, that's the way it works. The number of times where I had meetings and he's standing in front of where the tree stand is. I'm like, all right. So gun season comes to an end. Muzzleloader season, first week into muzzleloader season.
Yeah.
And I bet it's 60 degrees that Sunday, night of muzzleloader season. I'm actually not even, I've got my heavy camo on, but it's just because the temperature's going to, dip a little bit.
What month is this at this point?
December.
This is December. Late December? Early
December, December 6th.
Okay.
So actually our muzzleloader season now is longer in the lower part of the state than our gun season. I'm sitting there. I text the wife. I'm like, hey, start up the charcoal. I'll cook, some burgers and that, when I get done. Because it was warm. I'm still depressed that I messed up on this deer, and I'm not going to see a thing type thing. And I'm sitting there, and I wasn't in the stand 15 minutes. And I see something stand up in the fence line. Now, granted, it's thick down the fence line for me in this tree stand. And it's him. He's standing there about 70 yards away, 60 yards away. He just stands up, stretches out, not a care in the world. Yeah. I'm like, are you kidding me? I start shaking a little bit. I'm like, doing all the things that, hey, how can I mess this up too? I literally take my scope. I had a 3x9, Bushnell lead on it.
Yeah.
And I zoom into 9 power, and I'm literally looking for branches that are in the way. And I finally find a hole. Of course, the deer's not standing in the hole. I'm like, well, if you can come this way, I'll have a shot at him. And, there's brush in the way. Can't shoot this. Can't do this. Can't do this. And he finally steps into the hole. I pull the trigger. Of course, with the, muzzleloader, smoke everywhere. Can't see a thing. I hear him take off out of the brush. I hear a crash, but I'm thinking it's just the breaking stuff getting out of there. And so, but I thought, it was a really good shot. So I literally get down under my tree stand, and if you see the trail cam picture of me walking by, it's like I'm on, walking on clouds, tiptoes, walking down there. It's a pretty good pace. And I get down to where I think it is, and I'm looking in the woods, and I could see a long way, just, no real cover, just, some hardwoods, and it goes down, and then it goes back up a hill. And I'm like, I don't see a thing. And I start looking to where I think the deer was standing, and I start looking back. I'm like, oh my goodness, it's a mess. I swear there was a 3 foot by 3 foot hole that, I had.
Right.
So then you see me walk by. I go back to the tree, and you see me walk by the trail cam, I've got my shoulders slumped, and I'm like kind of moping around.
Yeah.
And I climb back up to the tree, and I find the hole. And I'm like, well, I'm going to walk on the other side where it's thick as can be. I walk through the briars and then I find where it was bedded. And then I look, I'm like, oh, I can see where it was bedded down. And I'm like, oh, it's awesome. And then I take a step, and then you know that distinct chunk of lungs. I'm like, oh yeah, this is melee. Then I'm like, well, where did he go? So I literally walked 20 yards, and you know how you get those washouts from like those seasonal type creek bottoms.
Yeah,
he was laying in one of those.
Gotcha.
It was just the full gamut of like emotions. He had gore marks in his rear legs, and from when I saw him November 1st, I bet he was 50 pounds, 80 pounds lighter than what he was. I mean, just from fighting and running so hard. But the cool thing is, after he disappeared, so many of the bucks that were around started showing back up again all the time.
They're scared.
Yeah, I'm like going, he was the bully.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations on redeeming yourself.
Oh, well, the best part about it is like having, you know, the video to go along with it. I mean, it's just, I mean, that feeling, it just is sickening. I mean, people do crazy things in a tree stand and make mistakes all the time. But I mean, honestly, I think this deer must have lived on 50 acres.
Yeah, that's awesome. Very nice. Great story. I've got 10 rapid fire questions for you, TR.
Right away.
All right. What's your number one hunting tip of all time?
Observation. Observe.
Okay. What's that one thing that you can't hunt without, that thing that if you leave it in the truck or at home, it drives you crazy all day?
A working bow.
Yep. That's important. Definitely. Yeah. All right. What's your biggest pet peeve in hunting or life?
Stupidity.
Okay.
Either mine or somebody else's.
Yeah. How old are you today, TR?
39. I'll be 40 next week.
Happy birthday, by the way.
Thank you.
Knowing what you know today at almost age 40, what would you tell the 20-year-old TR Walters?
Be more patient.
You meet a stranger at a hunting convention and they come up and ask you what you do for a living. What do you tell them?
I'm a school teacher.
What did you have for breakfast this morning?
Actually, I had a donut.
A donut. All right. What kind?
Yeah. Oh, it was a Bavarian cream one.
Bavarian cream. Nice. All right. You get your own billboard. It's a blank canvas. You can put anything on it that you want. What does it say?
Enjoy life.
If I say the word successful to you, who's the first person that pops into your head and why?
I'm going to say my parents.
Okay.
And that's because, I mean, they've done a lot of great things and, you know, made it so, you know, like I get to enjoy some of the fruits of the labors and the whole works.
What's a day in the life of TR Walters look like?
Oh, on the go constantly. I'm doing something, keeps me out of trouble or gets me into trouble. I don't know which, but always doing something, you know, between baling hay, putting in food plots, working at the golf course, just try to do something all the time.
Awesome. All right. And what's a deer hunting day in the life look like?
Oh, early start, pretty relaxing, but I just love it, enjoying, you know, like the serenity of what's around there and never knowing exactly what's going to show up.
Gotcha. Very cool. All right. That's it. That's the 10 rapid fire questions. TR, this has been an honor and a pleasure having you on the show. The story was tremendous. You're clearly a deer hunter that puts a lot of thought and effort and works the skill set. It's like you never stop learning about what's going on in your woods as well. And I appreciate that, as we do here on the Big Buck Registry Deer Hunting Podcast, powered by USA Trail Cams. But good luck this year, and you got to come back and tell us another story.
All right. Well, hopefully I have one that maybe next year that's a little less maybe stressful to me.
A little less dramatic.
Yes, a little less dramatic. Yeah, opening night, a great one walked out and I shoot it. Yeah, that'd be great.
That wouldn't be a good story, but that's all right.
Yeah,
but it would make you smile. I guess TR came back and redeemed himself after that not so functional bow shot that left him hanging high and dry and not killing the deer that he eventually killed months later.
It's all part of deer hunting. You know, it's something that it's going to happen to everybody.
Yeah.
If it hasn't happened to you yet, it will in the future. That's hands down that you're going to make a bad shot or not have opportunity or something just wasn't right. And, you know, you learn from that and you put that in your Rolodex of things that's going to happen. And there's so much to be learned by that.
Yeah. I mean, I've had so many things go wrong that I always expect something to go wrong every time I go out. You know, it's just... You just kind of try not to make that same mistake the next time you go to the exact same spot in that exact same scenario. That's the way it goes. I remember one time I was in a tree stand and I did a little doe bleat, and I see this young buck coming up the trail, and it was when I wasn't so selective. I was more meat hunting. That time it was in a fairly densely populated part of New Hampshire, and I turn around to look at it, and I didn't have my bow hanging on my hook. I had it resting on my tree stand, my climber. And as I turned around to see what was coming down the trail, and of course it was this buck, I knocked the bow and it falls to the ground. Buck gets scared, runs away. But that's the types of things that just happen in deer hunting. It's just part of the game.
Yeah, for sure. It is. I was sitting here thinking on all the bad things that's happened when the deer.
Exactly. See that?
It's amazing. It really is.
They pile up. It's just, there's more of those than there are good things.
Right.
Not that they're bad things. There's just things that just don't go the way you'd hope they would go.
Yeah, and just little simple things that you adjust, and it's just like climbing up your tree stand. You got pins, and you're using a ladder stand. You got pins holding together. And for some reason, that one pin always catches your camouflage pant leg or whatever, and makes that noise when you go up and it's just like the next time you go there, you adjust that pin where it's not going to catch your leg. There's just all kinds of things. And, I've been trying to climb down real sneaky and hit that pin on the same night that I climbed up and hit it. And it spooked off a couple of does. I really didn't want to educate where I was located. And It's just crazy, the knowledge that just being in the woods and in your tree stand, man, it's unbelievable how much that educates you.
I completely agree. And on that note, Dusty, after all the things that you've done wrong, do you have a Chubby Tines tip of the week for us?
Yeah, I do, Jay. And it's going to take me back to when I first started getting knowledge of how to get a hold of hunting land and where to go to places to execute the landowners. And I'm going to go into my personal bag of tricks here and share something that I do if I'm in a bind and I need a place to hunt,
The Chubby Tines tip of the week is sponsored by Morse's Sporting Goods. Firearms, used firearms, bows, used bows, located at 85 Kentucky Falls Road in Hillsborough, New Hampshire. Give Jim a call at 603-464-3444, morsessportinggoods.com. Your dollars go further in New Hampshire. There's no sales tax. Morse's Sporting Goods.
I want to say 99% of farmers have this one particular restaurant either within a county or a couple cities over that they all like to congregate to have breakfast. It's where they can sit down and cut up and have fun with each other. And it seems like if you know a few farmers or at least one farmer that may catch that breakfast, that's somewhere where you can capitalize on a piece of property to hunt on. You start making the effort to show up there for breakfast. Either it's a Saturday morning or Sunday morning if you're off work Tuesday or Wednesday or any day of the week that you're off work, or just a day that you don't have nothing going on and you say, hey, I need to go to this particular restaurant, sit down and have breakfast with these farmers, and walk in and introduce yourself and sit down with them. Say, hey, you guys care if I join you for breakfast? And they're going to say, no, not one bit. Who are you? What, they're going to want to know about you.
Right.
You made the effort to show up there and you made the attempt to sit down with them. That's going to spark their interest. It's not very often that somebody walks into their breakfast at their congregation meeting area and asks to sit down with them, because it's usually a clique of 8 to 15 guys that just catch up, maybe it's once or twice a week, or maybe it's even every day. So just go ahead and sit down and introduce yourself and tell them, hey, you're a bow hunter, and, and maybe take a couple pictures with you, or if you got them on your phone, get them out and show them to them. And let them know that you're kind of interested in finding a place to hunt on. And if you continue to show up to that breakfast meeting or a congregation area, they're going to start to recognize you, and they're going to learn who you are, and they're going to build a personal trust at breakfast that's going to lead into crop damage. They're going to start talking about that, and that's your opportunity. When they start talking about deer tearing the heck out of their soybeans or their cornfields or their hay fields, you just say, hey, I could be the guy to go in there and kill off a few of them deer for you and maybe help out your yields. And don't just run in there and say, hey, can I hunt your place? Not introduce yourself or get to know them, because it's not going to work. Get to know them a little bit, build a little trust with them, and maybe if you got a couple that you like and you know that they got a piece of property you could possibly hunt on, maybe buy their breakfast. Just use that morning meeting that is a group of friends or buddies or fellow farmers. Go in there and sit down and try to capitalize on a piece of property with that route. That's my Chubby Tines tip of the week, Jay.
Great tip, man. I was just about to ask you how many people show up and do that, and where you go as a farmer to hang out. Probably not too many.
No, it doesn't happen very often, but usually when it does, there's always somebody there that's looking for somebody to hunt a farm that They don't necessarily live on. That's something I'm picking up on, that if they don't live there, it's not that they don't care, but they're a little more lenient on what happens there.
Right.
So if they own a couple farms, and they got one down the road from their house, and the odds are you're going to get permission to hunt that farm because, for one, they got crop damage.
Right.
Number two, they visually can't see you pulling it out, and you're not, an aggravation to them.
Right.
And, farmers like to have people on their land. Not necessarily just for hunting, but for the aspect of trespassers, and they almost need a guy to give them some information, some feedback on what's going on their piece of land down the road.
Right. That's a great tip.
Yeah, if they got somebody hunting in there, and say you're seeing some trespassers, and you call the farmer and say, hey, you got a couple guys coming in here, and maybe they're just trespassing fishing. I know some areas in New Hampshire and places like that, there's really no trespassing laws. But, here in Ohio, if you don't have written permission, you're not supposed to be there. So,
right.
Therefore, if you notify the farmer that, hey, you got a couple guys coming in here on four-wheelers or a Jeep or a pickup truck, and, hey, they're driving down the edge of your beans down here to get down to your pond down there and fish, and maybe they don't have permission, and that's just something that you can educate the farmer on. He can get it stopped and maybe make a few extra dollars on his crops, and his pond ain't going to be fished out when his grandkids want to go fishing, or his son or whoever, daughter, friend, whoever wants to go fishing, there's fish there. So the farmer actually uses the hunter as a piece of education on what's going on in a piece of property. He can't watch it all at all times.
Right.
But if he knows you're there morning and evening or midday or whenever you'd like to hunt, then you can relay some information back to him, and they appreciate that and they like that.
Yeah, that gives them information that they can't obtain otherwise, and you're building a trust. So, Dusty, where can we find you when you're not hanging out here on the microphone with me?
You can look me up, facebook.com/Chubby Times Outdoors. You can shoot me an email, dusty@bigbuckregistry.com. You can also look me up on Instagram, @ChasingAntler. Jay, where can the people reach out to you when you're not on the mic?
Shoot me an email, jay@bigbuckregistry.com. You can always follow us on Facebook, and facebook.com/bigbuckregistry. If you'd like to get your picture of the giant buck that you shot featured on the page, all you have to do is go to bigbuckregistry.com/mybuck, and all the instructions will be right there for you. We don't post every buck that gets sent in. In fact, a lot of times they didn't meet the criteria. And the criteria, it's not necessarily how big the buck is, but we do want to see a picture of you with your buck, preferably in the field or a wall mount. But we don't just post pictures of the buck. We want pictures of you and the buck, because it ties that human aspect of hunting together with the wild. And without that, it's just half of the story. So go to bigbuckregistry.com/mybuck, and all the information is right there. If you are an iTunes user, please leave us a review. We could use as many reviews as we can get. If you love the show, leave us a 5-star, and subscribe to this show on iTunes if you're an iTunes user. Coming up very soon, we will be on iHeartRadio. I know I said that for a couple weeks. I guess they're really backed up over at iHeart. And a lot of podcasters just sent their stuff over. But that's coming. It's coming very, very soon. So stay tuned for iHeartRadio. That'll be available across all platforms. You'll be able to listen to the show of every single show that we have. We have been busy posting our shows to YouTube because we have that feature now where we can get the full-length version of the show on YouTube, even though it's known as a video platform. It actually is converting our audio to a video, so you can listen to it there, which is great because sometimes you might not be an iTunes user, but you can always tap into YouTube and get our channel and all of our great interviews over there. You can find us on Twitter, twitter.com/BigBuckRegistry, Instagram.com/BigBuckRegistry. You can see the theme there. And I think that is pretty much everywhere we are at.
A whole lot of big buck.
Big buck, everywhere a big buck.
I'm Dusty Phillips.
And I'm Jay Scott.
And this is another great episode of the Big Buck Registry Deer Hunting Podcast. We'll see you next week.
Can't wait.